it's not a do X and you're going to get Y type of thing, however. But there is good research. So I will go to gratitude. So having a gratitude journal, or just making note of what you're grateful for every day, what that does is it starts to rewire our brain. And so what ends up happening is, after I start doing that for a while, a week, even less than that, than in some studies, is that my brain starts going, oh, every night I'm going to be writing down what I'm grateful for, and I need to start finding those situations. So my brain just unconsciously starts to look or reinterpret the experiences that we have from a gratitude perspective. So I'm starting to pay attention to things that I should be grateful for. And by doing that, you kind of enhance your life, right? You start to see more things that you can be grateful for, or notice those things that are going on in your life. And that is one way you're rewiring your brain in order to pay attention to those types of things.
Everybody, this week we're talking to Dr. Kurt Nelson, who studies behavior science and how that impacts the decisions we make, our motivations in life, and then also how we can apply that to business or teams or our relationships to make better decisions, make better connections with people. We dive into a lot of like the books that I like to read. The deep scientific aspects of why we think the way we do or what motivates us. So a lot of great content here, a lot of, kind of deep and nitty gritty stuff, but it's going to be a great conversation. So let's pick it up with the conversation with Kurt.
Kurt, wanted to thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of dive into some behavioral science with the listeners. And where I wanted to start was, what is behavioral science?
Yeah. So Jordan, thanks for having me. Appreciate this. Behavioral science, really, I think there's probably a more academic perspective on this, but when I think about behavioral science, what it is, it's the study of why people do what they do. And so that encompasses a number of different types of what we would call more traditional elements of psychology, social psychology, neuroscience, behavioral economics, all of those kind of factors that come in that are basically just looking at our behavior, the way that we think, the way that we act, and trying to peel back the layers on that to understand what are those things, why are we doing what we're doing, and really get a deeper understanding of humans and how we interact with others and how we interact in our own.
Is it like kind of uniform across all of us? Are there patterns to it, or is it nuanced whenever you think about why someone has motivations or struggles or whatever it may be?
No, it's so I mean, there are patterns. So this
Okay.
is, I don't want to make it seem like there are not patterns. And those are the things that we look at. Now, many of those patterns are not the ones that we necessarily think that they should be in various different aspects. And one of the bigger pieces around behavioral science and any of these social science types approaches is that humans are complex, and that we are complex in a variety of different pieces. So the idea that we can have a silver bullet to come in and understand what motivates people is kind of pie in the sky thinking. It isn't something that is actual reality. That the difference between our personalities, our upbringing, some of the genetic components that we have, as well as the contextual components that we're in, both the physical environment and what that drives from a behavior perspective, as well as the social environment and what that drives, all of those factors come into play, so that at any point in time, two people could be in the same situation but respond very differently, or two very different situations, and we could act exactly the same. So all of those factors come into play.
This is a topic that, for some reason, and probably just it's probably human nature, I've always been super fascinated about ever since I was like in high school. But you mentioned environment and kind of things that happen to us that can impact that. how did you, I want to kind of take a step back and think about what got you into this field. Like,
Uh,
was it something that piqued your interest when you were growing up? Was it picking a college major? Like, what got you into it?
no, it's a great question. One of the things that I've looked at on this is I've always been interested in just people, right? It's always an interesting kind of thing. It's who we interact with on every day, and like, why are people doing different things? But I think really the kind of cusp of this is I was getting my MBA, and I took a course, PhD level course called consumer behavior. And within consumer behavior, what you're looking at is, why do consumers buy or not buy different things? And one of the studies that they do, and this is just one, but it kind of crystallizes, I think, for people to understand, is, look, we know that if I have a product and it's priced at $3 and I reduce that price by a penny to $2.99, I will get an increase in sales, right? It happens that $2.99 is vastly different than $3. However, if I have a product priced at $3.01 and I reduce it down to $3, I don't see any increase in sales. It's still, I'm saving a penny. So if I'm a classical economist, which is I mean, I had an economic undergraduate degree,
Okay.
a penny is a penny. So I should, I should try to save a penny, regardless of if it's going from $3 down to $2.99 or from 301 down to 3. But that's not how we operate. We view $2.99 as vastly different, and there goes into, can get into all the reasons behind that. But the ultimate piece of this is, we don't always act in rational ways. And that just fascinated me. And so I then subsequently went to go get my PhD in IO psychology, industrial organizational psychology, to really understand that. And a lot of my work focuses on employee and human motivation, engagement, and variety of those pieces. And so that's the piece that kind of was the catalyst to
Okay.
get me into this. Yeah.
What did you want to do business? Is that what that economics beginning was for, or was it just?
Yeah, no, I was so I went in, I was in business. I wanted to do business. I actually started my own company before, so I got my MBA, came up and moved to Minnesota, worked for a company there. I tell everybody I was probably the lowest paid MBA graduate in my graduating class, not by a little, but by a lot. Because I thought that this company was a consulting, going in doing performance improvement and all this other aspects around, again, trying to improve employee kind of how they operate in various different pieces. And to a certain degree it was, and luckily for me, the company that I ended up going to work for had a lot of little different divisions. And what I started off was more of a account manager, boring kind of, it's not boring. Many people love it.
Right.
I found it kind of tedious. It did not fit me very well. But there was this other group that was doing kind of this executive strategy and team dynamic work and all stuff. So I weaseled my way over into that group, and then started my own company a couple of years after that. And then went on and got my PhD. So even understanding the human side of things, I always have been interested in how that applies to business and work.
Well, and I think that's what's the most interesting piece of it is when you think about being in business, when you think about, or starting your own business, you're always going to have to deal with people, whether
Yeah,
it be employees or customers. Like, that's the biggest part of it. And I think that that's what's driven me to, do some more research in it. Like, and recently I was rereading Drive by Daniel Pink,
yeah,
and it talked about like intrinsic motivation over the extrinsic motivators that a lot of times as business owners we think that we need, right?
yeah.
So, and the I'll paraphrase, but the rough idea is that you're only going to get, you can actually create negative motivations by doing the financial rewards to certain things, as opposed to setting up an environment for people to be, self-motivated.
Yep.
But is that the kind of stuff, and that was a long-winded way of asking, is that the kind of work that you're doing with your business? Like, so you have a business that consults with other
Yeah.
organizations. So is that the kind of thing that you're talking to these people about, is how to motivate their team? And what are the ways that you kind of teach people to do that?
Exactly. So Jordan, you kind of nailed it there. And I actually, I have a lot of problems with Dan Pink's drive, and we actually interviewed him on our podcast, and I didn't
Nice.
go into it because I was just too scared. It's a human, element, but he gets a lot right. And
Mhm.
actually it's, I credit him for one of the biggest long-term clients that I have, because they read Drive,
Yeah.
and it got them interested in this and got them thinking about, again, how do you motivate people? And it isn't always just offering them some additional carrot, some additional money, some additional thing, because we know that doesn't always work. And sometimes, as you just mentioned, it backfires. And so, yes, what we do is we go in and we work with organizations and try to understand what are the dynamics that they have from a cultural perspective, the environment that they're working in, the different interactions between business units and the employees within those business units. And what does that mean for employee engagement? What does that mean for employee motivation, particularly as it relates to sales often? Uh, and what we find, so you asked, like, so what does motivate people? And again, I will answer in a horrible way, the old, consultant, that it depends, right? But that is true. I mean, it's human nature. And so what we do know is, as you talked about, there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And what I think many people get wrong is that they think of it as an either or. And all of the research, and particularly a lot of research within the past 10 years, is kind of indicating that it's more of a continuum, that it isn't one or the other. It's like certain times the extrinsic motivation kind of plays more importantly, and then other times the intrinsic motivation plays a bigger picture, and kind of how we think about why people are motivated. And this idea of organizations, we need to understand some of the underlying and those basic drives that we have. We're driven to acquire things and resources, right? That's that extrinsic part. We do a lot for money. We do a lot for that bonus at the end of the year, that quarterly sales incentive that you have, right? Those are things that we do. But we also do things in that mean for just like that award on the wall, that that recognition from my manager. Those types of things kind of fit into that. But we're also social creatures, and so we are motivated to ensure that we have positive relationships with those people that we work with, whether that be our peers, our bosses, et cetera. And so the dynamics of how that works is really important as well. And how do you set up the culture within your organization to do that? But we're also, we're a creative seeking individuals, human beings. And so goals and challenges are motivating for us, right? And there's lots of research on goals, and it's one of the big things that I always work with companies on, is like making sure you're setting up the right types of goals and the challenges that people have. And then finally, there's also this element about self-identity, who I am, and the purpose that I see my life having. And does that parlay itself into the work that I'm doing within an organization? Or how can I tie in what I want to achieve, the purpose, the kind of life mission that I have? And can I attribute that, or can I align that with what I'm doing in my work? And if we can, that's really powerful when it gets to motivation. So long-winded answer to a very simple, so seemingly simple question.
Yeah, I'm trying to pick which way to go with it, but I think I want to stay on the business side for a second, in the thought that when we try and set up that culture, when we try and set up those goals, what's the best way that you found for people to do that? Is it truly like a one-on-one with each employee? Is it finding exactly what motivates them, or can it be a little bit more broadly captured?
Yeah, the best would be the one-on-one, but that is difficult and can't scale, and particularly if you're in a larger organization, even in small organizations. And then the one caveat I would put with that too is that as humans, we are horrible at understanding what actually motivates us, right? We
Hmm.
answer that question, and when we ask it in surveys and other things, I can tell you exactly what people will answer. And typically, and it's like cash, money, that's what motivates me. And you 70 to 80% in any type of survey that you do. And yet when we do a controlled study, with this, an experiment, and we put cash up against these other kind of motivators, the other motivators oftentimes will outperform that by a significant amount. And people actually even see that. And then you tell them, well, what would you rather have? And they go, well, I still want the money. And you're going, yeah, but obviously at some point you are being more motivated by these other things. And we're not very good at being able to understand our own drives, our own motivations. And I always say, if we did, there would not be any obesity or, like eating the healthy foods and all the things that we know are good for us and that we often try to go and do. But, we oftentimes fail in those kind of personal elements as well, because there's a lot more factors that go into what motivates us than what we think. And we're often too focused in on the rational side of things when we're emotional beings, and that emotion kind of takes hold. And then after our behavior, we rationalize that away. We say, oh, well, I did this because of X, Y, or Z, when really you did it because, you were hungry and you wanted that Oreo or whatever it was, that the behavior that you did. And we rationalize it away.
Well, then
I think I answered your question. I apologize.
That's okay. No, because now I want to switch to the individual, because you brought up something super important, something that I struggle with, and I'm sure everybody does. And it's how do you then determine what that real motivation is for yourself?
Yeah, which is a really interesting piece, because one of the things I always talk about is that our brains are wired to fool us, right? The way that we've evolved, they evolved over, hundreds of thousands of years, and we lived in a very different environment. And some of those things that helped us kind of survive in that environment are no longer there. And so the idea of trying to understand, there are certain things that you can do. And one is actually to just kind of take a really deep look and an honest look, which is the hard part, back at past behavior, and trying to look and if you can, what's even better is to start plotting and trying to make predictions about what behavior will be based on certain things, and then looking back at what you did, because we often look back in what's called rosy retrospection, this idea that the past was always better than what we did, and I knew I would do that because of this. And if you look back at what you said, like when it was going out, you were 100% opposite direction from where you were, what it ultimately ended up. But we tend to, our mind kind of conflags that and does different things. We have a thing that's called confirmation bias within behavioral science. This idea that that our brain, and again, this isn't consciously, but subconsciously, our brain looks to find information that supports pre-held beliefs and discount any information that we have that would maybe counter or dissuade us from that pre-held belief. And that goes to our understanding of what motivates us in various different pieces. So we have a hard time. So one is, if you can get them data, right? Track that data, understand, and kind of look and say, here's what I thought, here's another thing. Other piece on that is to ask a good close confidant, and kind of our close people that we know actually have a pretty good insight into us. And that's one thing. And the last thing, and this isn't necessarily about maybe motivation so much, but it is around, again, the same thing around, we're not very good at what of understanding what motivates us. We're also not very good at understanding what will make us happy or satisfied or feeling content. We often go, oh, if I get that promotion, then I will. Or if we get X, that'll make my life so much better. And Y, if I get that type of job, it will do this for me. And again, we're not very good at predicting how that actually works. And so just asking people who have done it before and trying to actually get people who have been in that situation. So if it is you're going for a promotion, or you're trying to, build an entrepreneurial company, or, whatever it is that you're trying to do, talk to people who have gotten that job, talk to people who are entrepreneurs, and kind of really take that information in to see, all right, does this still hold true for me from what they're saying?
I really like the term rosy retrospection, because I've always said my term for it was that hindsight's always like 20/40, because it's not perfect. But I didn't know that there was actually a word for it. I just knew that our hindsight typically gets blurred a little bit by what we want to think happened or what we want to think motivated us. So I'm glad that there's an actual term for it.
Yeah, and people have
Scientifically.
studied it. It's interesting when you look back and you have real, like, here's what was actually going, here's what you said in that time, and now you look back at it and you're saying, oh, but it was all this. And it's very interesting, really interesting piece too. Like, if we think about and I'm sorry, I'm going off on a
That's okay.
tangent here, but there's work about kind of how we experience life, right? And so there's an anticipated experience that we have, there's the actual experience that we have, and then there's the reflective experience that we have. And so I think about this from a vacation, right? So if you think about a vacation, you can, like, my father-in-law, man, he loves planning vacations and doing all the research and where we're going to go and all of this, and he's living this kind of experience even before it happens, right? And we all kind of do that in various different levels. And then there's the actual experience that you have, and then there's the remembering back on that experience.
Mhm.
And so there's some really interesting work on this. Like, if you ask people, would you rather spend a comfortable 2 days in like a Holiday Inn somewhere, right? And or would you rather spend 2 days in an ice castle? It's kind of cold and different and maybe not as fun. You don't get a fun pool or various different things. And if you ask people just about the experience, they say, oh, I'll stay at the Holiday Inn. But if you ask them about, hey, in other words, if I couldn't remember it, what would I rather do? But if I can remember it, most people will say, I want that ice castle experience or that more adventure, because I'm going to remember it differently. And I don't have to, I'm not in the moment. So it's no longer painful for me, but the memory is going to stand out much more than the Holiday Inn that just gets blended into every other time that we've ever gone out.
On that, this is going past motivation, but it makes me think of a book. I forget the author, but it was Moonwalking with Einstein, and it talked
Okay.
about how we remember our life. It gets broken up into segments, and that's why we like the everyday things kind of get blended in together. And like you talked about, those meaningful vacations or events or whatever is what creates like moments that you can then date from, and that's what makes you have a more fuller life. So it's interesting to think about it in that terms of like how you experience life, and that. So is it that people should maybe choose to do things that are unique, or like what's your thoughts around that? Like, should that shape the way we go about making decisions about the things we're going to do or the work we do?
So again, I'll answer in the it depends.
Okay.
Right? So but to the degree that we have the opportunity to choose between something that might be a little bit more discomforting but unique, and maybe push us in ways that we're not necessarily accustomed to, versus just kind of going that comfort but kind of more routine route.
Mm.
I would say, in general, pick the novel, pick that unique and different things. Paul Bloom is a great researcher, and he talks about this idea that when we think about living a happy, fulfilled life, it's usually like we think about this idea of having pleasure and all of these kind of things. But what we know is that people that live that actually don't feel as satisfied about their life as compared to people who have gone through struggles and maybe are going through situations that, or put themselves into situations that put them under some stress or duress and various different things. Now, I'm not saying go out and put yourself at risk
Right.
on those types of things. Please don't do that. But there is an element of saying, life isn't always about making it as easy as possible. Life, actually, you gain meaning from the struggle part of things, and that's good. And so
Right.
put yourself in those situations where you struggle. That's how you grow, that's how you expand. And as you said, that chapter of your lives, right, that are kind of earmarked by different things. And oftentimes some of those struggles are those chapter that starting a new chapter that
Mm.
lend it into that piece. So again, it depends, but yeah, most likely, probably, if you had to put it on a flip a coin, you go with the pushing yourself.
No, I like that. And it's like that's the full human experience, right? It's those good times feel better when you've made it through a struggle or done something challenging. So I think that I agree that that's important. And you talked about like that and I'm flipping back to motivation again here, but you said something about like the subconscious, and that's something that always intrigued me as well. And I like the idea of, and I want to ask you because you're an expert on this. Can we train our subconscious? So, like when we think about goals we want to attain or habits, daily habits that we need to do to improve ourselves, can we start to actually, and how do we start to train our subconscious to kind of meet those things?
Yeah. So yes, I will. I will go. Yes, we can. Um, it's not a do X and you're going to get Y type of thing, however, but there is good research. So I will go to gratitude. So having a gratitude journal, or just making note of what you're grateful for every day, what that does is it starts to rewire our brain. And so what ends up happening is after I start doing that for a while, a week, even less than that, than in some studies, is that my brain starts going, oh, every night I'm going to be writing down what I'm grateful for. And I need to start finding those situations. So my brain just unconsciously starts to look or reinterpret the experiences that we have from a gratitude perspective. So I'm starting to pay attention to things that I should be grateful for. And by doing that, you kind of enhance your life, right? You start to see more things that you can be grateful for, and or notice those things that are going on in your life. And that is one way you're rewiring your brain in order to pay attention to those types of things. So that I think is an interesting piece, and you can parlay that same type of thing into how we approach motivation or habits and various different pieces of that. But what is the mindset? How can you reframe situations? And how can you set up your environment? So one of the things that we talk about in behavior change is that people always think about behavior change as, oh, it's the willpower I have. If I'm motivated enough, I'm going to do it. And we know that the environment that we place ourselves in has a great impact on our behavior. And so one of the things that I always talk about with people who are trying to do behavior change components is if you can set up the environment, both your physical as well as your social environment, to make the things that you want to do easier, right? Reduce the friction to doing those things, and make the things that you don't want to do harder to increase the friction around those things, then you're much more likely to have that desired behavior and less of the undesired behavior. And so I'll give you an example. And this isn't work that I did, but it was work that, and God, I'm going to forget the researcher. Anyway, they had interviewed a person. That person had desired to, wanted to learn how to play guitar, and they'd set this plan. I'm going to practice guitar for an hour every day when I come home from work. But what happened? What they actually said. So they had a plan. I'm going to practice. They'd get home from work, long, tired day at work. They sit down on the couch, and what is in front of them? Oh, there's the remote control. And so what do? They turn the television on. And what happens? Oh, you get stuck in watching that television, right? For that couple hours. And all of a sudden it's too late. I got to get dinner. Don't have time to practice the guitar. So what they did is they said, I'm going to move the television into the back room, and I'm going to move the guitar out of the back room to sit next to the couch. So what happens? You come back and you come after work. Oh, I'm tired. I sit down on the couch. There's no longer a remote there, but there's my guitar. What do? I pick up the guitar and I start practicing the guitar. And so this person found that by changing that environment, making that desired behavior easy, making the undesired behavior hard, i.e., playing the guitar versus watching television, and they were able to take that and leverage that. So
Why is it that writing something down, like that gratitude journal, or is it so powerful? Is it just because it's bringing it to the front of our attention? Like
no, go ahead.
It's just you hear anytime you read about people trying to tell you how to be successful, journaling comes up a lot, and it's something I don't do but wish I did. And it's like I guess I'm struggling with the understanding of what is it about it that makes it so powerful, because I do think it works.
So journaling has a couple different things, and writing things down do a couple different things. And actually, there's some elements too that of not just writing things down, but sharing things with others. And there's different research on that. But writing things down makes it concrete. And so we know that by making things more concrete, that they're more likely to happen from a behavioral perspective. So if I write down that I want to go to the gym 3 times a week, right? That's better than me just saying I want to go to the gym, and kind of thinking that in my brain, because now I've crystallized it. And again, if you write things down that are very specific, it's 3 times a week, or even Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. There's an element that's our brains kind of work in some interesting ways around when we do that. So that is very powerful. And then if you make that intention known to others, you have some social pressure on you in order to do that. And so there's all sorts of things around that you can do in order to do that. So being concrete is one thing, and kind of having it written down does that to us. On the gratitude side, what it's actually doing is, it's just, as you said, the other piece is it's bringing it to the forefront. And so by bringing it to the forefront of your thoughts and your brain, the way that our brains work, it's basically neurons firing at different cues and different things, and different neurochemicals being released, and energy kind of component between the neurons. And there are ways, if you strengthen those neurons, those neuron pathways, it makes those easier to happen. And so they're more likely to happen. It's memory and variety of other factors that come into play on this. I'm very dumbing it down and simplifying it, but this idea that if we are able to kind of build up the right neural pathways, those behaviors, those thinking patterns, the way that we process things is going to be easier and more likely to happen. And that's what we do when we write things down. The act of actually having your hand write something versus even typing it has been shown to have a whole different way of being processed in your memory, and a variety of other factors along that line.
Interesting. Well, no, I appreciate you dumbing it down for me in particular.
Hey, I need to dumb it down for me. That's all I have to say.
No, so because that's interesting that it actually is, because it does feel like, and I've done it before where it's like I'll write specific things down, but then I quit doing it for a while. But those things that were written, for whatever reason, either get manifested or stay kind of in your mind longer. And conversely to that, are there things that we do that are self-sabotaging or limiting us from reaching our goals? Like, what are some of the negative things that we can start to remove from our behavioral activities?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things on that is that we tend to think, if I just have the right motivation, then I will be able to achieve whatever that goal is that I'm trying to achieve, or achieve that objective. And motivation is important. It's the work that I do, right? So I'm not discounting motivation, but in and of itself, it doesn't necessarily work for everybody, and different personalities kind of harp on that differently. But this idea that motivation is one piece of the puzzle, that willpower in and of itself is not enough to kind of have that daily, particularly things that require us to do things on a consistent basis over and over and over again. Willpower works really good. Motivation works really good if it's a one-time thing, right? We get excited about it. We go. It's there. We're doing it. But when it's over and over, what you have to try to do is understand, all right, where are those points that could derail me? What are the barriers that I'm going to face? And then we often try to do what's called if-then statements. All right. So if X happens, then I will do Y. And if we do that, there's an element that, again, in our cold state, this idea of when we're thinking about things and we're not in the moment, we're more rational and we can kind of work through what we should be doing. When we're in the moment, it's much harder for us to do that. And again, our emotional side pulls out as opposed to our rational side. But if we've kind of pre-committed, if we have an if-then statement along that line, not saying that it's always going to work, but we're more likely, again, to do the right things. Again, thinking about having tools or setting up your environment. So making sure that you are putting yourself in situations. And again, we talked about the physical environment before, but social environment is also really important. This idea of who I hang out with. Am I around people that bring me up, or am I around people that bring me down? And kind of understanding that and looking at that. What are those things that you can do in order to set up the appropriate social environment for you to succeed? So,
Well, and we've all heard that quote, the quote, and I've talked about it before, where it's like you become the average of like the five closest people to you. Are there scientific things that prove that that's true?
yeah.
Okay.
So there's it's interesting, right? So there's research that shows if you have an obese friend, you're 30% more likely to become obese.
Mm.
What's even more interesting is if you have a friend who has a friend that's obese, you're like 10% more likely to
Wow.
become obese. So it's even kind of going out to two factors. And so there's other research that goes around that, but I think that's interesting. But if just think about this. So all right, my friend or my friend group, right? I may be trying to, change my life and be more focused in on exercise and eating healthy and doing different things. But the group of friends that I hang out with, what do? We go to the bar on Friday night and we eat a big burger and drink a couple beers. That's what we do. And so, all right, if I propose to them, well, instead of doing that, let's go and, go out and do some exercise or something. That's a lot harder. Or even if I'm with them and I go, I'm going to eat a salad and I'm going to have, water, they're going to look at you funny and they're going to probably, give you some grief about that. Maybe not, but even if they don't, even if it's not overt, there's some, kind of, well, that's changing and we don't like that kind of change. And as opposed to if I hang out with people that instead of on a Friday night, they say, hey, let's go play hockey. Let's go, go for a walk around the lake or whatever it would be. Well, that lends itself into the behaviors that you're wanting. And so, yes, the people around us influence our behavior a huge amount and often in ways that we don't necessarily think of. So emotions are contagious. This is another thing. So people that come in and negative emotions, actually, this is sad to say, negative emotions are more contagious than positive emotions, right? So
Wow.
somebody comes in upset, you're more likely to go down on that downward spiral than you lifting them up because you're in an upper, in a positive mood. So all of those factors come into play.
Is and this is getting pretty specific, but is it neurochemical that makes those negative emotions so much stronger? Like, why is it that those are more powerful?
Yeah, so I'm not sure on the neurochemical thing. I do know from an evolutionary perspective, though, we're tending we our brains pay more attention to the potential dangers that are out
Okay.
there. There's an element that's called loss aversion. Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky kind of coined this in the late 70s. It's been really interesting that we feel the pain of a loss about twice as much as the equivalent pleasure that we get from a similar gain. So in other words, I lose $100, that feels really bad. I gain $100, that feels good, but that loss of that $100 is about twice as painful as the pleasure that I get from an equivalent gain. It's a rough
Wow.
way of putting it, but that kind of we tend to over index on the negatives, and so and a negative emotion that's signaling something, and it could signal that, hey, this is dangerous, that there is again, think we grew up in tribes and tribal, and one of the worst things to happen is being ostracized from the tribe, being kicked out of the tribe. You're going to not survive, you're not going to procreate, all of those things. And so even from an emotional, it's kind of why rumors and gossip and all of those things we still have, because it's a way of kind of ensuring that we are in the know about what's going on within our group, our community, and trying to make sure that we're leveraging the positive relationships, but we notice the negatives much more than the positives. So
Is that why social media is so powerful?
it's one of the reasons. Yeah.
Well,
It's
when you put it that way, it's like, well, we have to be in the know. We don't want to be outside of the tribe. It's like, well, that's why we have, those obsessions with knowing what's going on and what this person's doing. And I need to, be equivalent to that or better because they're doing so many things that I'm not doing. And it's like, how does someone escape, not necessarily escape, but focus more on like their true passions or their true um, goals and motivations, and as opposed to letting outside forces drive that force?
Yeah, so I'll go back again to the beginning that we talked about, is like set up your environment to try to limit those. And again, from a social media perspective,
Yeah.
there are tools out there that limit the amount of time you have or which you can see or when you can see it. So I encourage people to do that. But the other piece, and just more from a kind of self perspective, I'll talk about mindfulness, and not necessarily mindfulness of like sitting and kind of just being, with your thoughts, a meditative kind of thing, which is, again, if you do that and you can do that, fantastic. But I know a lot of people that just that isn't their thing. But mindfulness from just the perspective of kind of being aware and being more self, um, kind of reflective in the moment of what is going on. How am I showing up? What are the things that are happening to me in this moment? And when we do that, in those types of situations where we kind of want, it's like that negative piece comes and goes down, that doesn't, if we can be more mindful of it, we can often kind of put a stop to it. So there's research that talks about the dual processing brain. And I'm going to, again, try to keep this simple. But this idea that our brain works kind of in two modes. One is, again, I'll go back, Danny Kahneman labeled this system one thinking and system two thinking. There's others that have done similar, and it's a variety of different pieces. But system one thinking is this really fast heuristic. It's the automatic response that we have. It's an emotional kind of gut response, and we respond in the moment. And that's good, right? We need that. If we're walking across the street and we hear a car honk, all right, we don't want to have to sit there and go, what does that car honking mean? What should I do? No, we want to be able to like run and move, right, and get out of the way of this car that's coming to us. But then we also have system two, which is our more critical thinking, getting into the prefrontal cortex of our brain and kind of processing things. And so again, as I think about this, if I ask you what's 2 plus 2, we all kind of go, oh, we got that answer, right? That's 4. But if I ask you what's 17 times 68, that doesn't come naturally to us. We have to actually think and process that. And both of those kind of thought processes are important, and we need to have them. But sometimes we default. So what's not good is when we default to system one when we should be doing more of a system two thinking. And so if you can put some moments to often just slow down, that's that mindfulness of paying attention to the moment. One trick that I often use in those situations is 2 breaths, 7 breaths. And so this idea that I don't want to make a decision before I've had 2 breaths, but I don't want to elongate that decision so that I'm thinking about it over and over and over again, so that I need to make that decision before I take 7 breaths. So for instance, if I'm making a decision about going to a restaurant, what restaurant? We have 3 restaurants to choose from. Don't just pick right away, take 2 breaths, but don't belabor that and go, oh my gosh, what, this, that. And so kind of those are just some of the things that we think about.
No, that's awesome. And Thinking Fast and Slow may be my favorite book ever.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and I recommend it all the time to people. And this is just from a business perspective, because to me it's like important when we think about that. I've never heard the 2 and 7 breath thing. So I really like that idea, because it's like, as a business owner or even a leader in your business, you're always making those decisions.
Yeah.
And you don't want to fall into the trap of that, system one thinking of the
Yeah.
impulse or whatever. But you also don't want to, waste, not necessarily waste time, but overthink things and get critical of yourself.
And again, there are certain moments where, again, if I hear honk, right, I want to jump. I don't want to have to take 2 breaths and kind of do that, right? That there are moments when you just need to make those intuitive things, and that's there. And there are moments too that I want to actually take more than 7 breaths to take. So if I'm making a decision on if we buy a company or if we go and expand into this marketing area, some strategic things, that's there. But there are lots of decisions, particularly from a business perspective. All right, so somebody comes to me with a question. Do I just do that immediate gut response, or do I kind of take some things about, all right, we want to Johnny's doing this. Should we put, Real on the project, or, Samuel, and kind of taking some of those breaths and thinking about that from that perspective.
And to I want to start going towards a summation of all this, because I feel like I could keep going down rabbit holes, but is that mindfulness piece the start of it? Like just starting to recognize in your own thinking that there are different processes. Is that the best first step for someone?
Yeah, I think that is a really good first step, is understanding in and of itself isn't going to drive behavior change, but understanding that this is going on and then setting a path of how to do it is the piece that does help that, right? So that mindfulness piece is just an element that allows us to be aware in the moment much more than just kind of going through life as it's kind of a blur, right? We talk about that you talked about that in, like, reflecting back. Well, even in the moment, sometimes things are a blur. You look back at, what did I just do? What did I just say? What was the decision I just made? Not really aware of what I just did. And being more mindful of those types of moments allows us to kind of make a more appropriate choices in those decisions that we're making, which lead to the behaviors and all of that kind of factors that go into place.
So if we were going to just like create a bullet list of things to start to create a framework or habits to help us reach our full potential. We kind of talked about removing the barriers. We talked about getting in the right mind space. Are there any other actions or items that you give to someone to say, hey, here's the list. Here's what you should at least start to think about if you're going to think about maximizing your full potential?
Yeah, so again, one is talking about the environment, making sure that you understand how the environment is influencing you, taking some time to think about that, really looking at what are your objectives, what are your goals. People, again, as we talked about, aren't really good at predicting what is going to make them happy in various different things, what motivates them. So understanding, trying to get a better understanding, having that mindfulness piece. Then it goes into setting aside and using tools, bringing in pieces that are going to help, again, you in achieving whatever the goals that you're set yourself for. And that can be, online tools, reminders, various different things. We've created a journal that kind of helps in setting up, what is the goal that you're trying to do, using behavioral science principles to help you, every week kind of identify what I need to do this week, and then every day what I need to do each day, and bringing in some of the behavioral science pieces around our behavior and kind of tying into that. So those types of tools, but also just other types of tools from, like I said, the utilizing social media and limiting some of those things. So understanding out there, and don't just depend upon willpower to have something, put yourself in the situation that you're going to likely have success.
Because our willpower is going to fail us, right?
For some people, willpower works really well. There are certain individuals who, like, they just set their mind to it and they do it. That is rare. It is not the common piece. And so if we depend upon willpower, again, we can do willpower for certain things, particularly one-off type things that we're going to do. But man, if you have to do something day in and day out, and it's not necessarily something that you just go, woohoo, I get to go and work out today. Yeah, you need to do something else besides just depend on willpower.
Well, that's where it's like discipline comes in more than that initial motivation. Like motivation is good for the spark that gets us going, but you kind of have to have a system of discipline to keep it going every day.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan, you talked earlier about this idea extrinsic and intrinsic motivation in different pieces, and what we found, actually some work that we did, is that oftentimes it's really good to use extrinsic motivation to get you started to do something, and then allow the intrinsic motivation to kick in. There's been research that says extrinsic motivation can decrease intrinsic motivation. Most of that has been kind of looked at and say, yeah, that can happen in certain specific situations, but in general, if you look over time, it doesn't. And so don't be worried about using extrinsic motivation to kind of kickstart things, because it really doesn't impact your intrinsic motivation to do stuff, at least in the long period. And so all of those kind of factors come into play.
No, I'm glad to hear you say that, because my next question was, when we think about it from a business perspective, or even just maybe our team, how do we start to then create systems of motivation for them?
Yeah.
Kind of applying those same principles.
Yeah. So again, take a look at like what are the one of the things that I think organizations don't always do is they kind of look at things from that rational perspective. Again, we talked about this like I'm gonna pay somebody more or offer this different type of reward, then that will be enough. Well, that's one piece of the puzzle. And make sure you understand how you've designed the rules for earning something. What are the
Mm,
expectations in different pieces? Because oftentimes there's unintended consequences because as humans, we try to find the easiest route to get something done. And sometimes that isn't the thing that you want them to be doing, or you're actually resulting in like selling one product and not selling another product because you have the incentive set up wrong about that product. And therefore, wow, we made a lot of, this is where our profit's coming from, but this was the new shiny thing and we wanted people to focus in on it. Well, we over indexed and all of a sudden they're selling all of this and we're not selling the thing that's making our profit and paying the light bills. So that's one piece of it, is understand what are your incentives driving, and B, are there any unintended consequences to that? And then B, let's start looking at, how are you setting up your teams? Are you setting them up to be competitive? Are you setting them up to collaborate? And how can you set up more collaboration? Again, that peer piece that we talked about, that bonding element of wanting positive relationships. And so the more that you can set up those opportunities, and don't, oftentimes again, people get overly stressed over, well, they're not working every single minute. Well, we know that if you actually give people, coffee breaks were invented because they actually increase productivity afterwards. People took a 15-minute break, and when they did that, wow, the overall productivity of the line increased at the end of the day, even though people were off of the line. Well, that's because your brain gets recharged and various different things. So having those little side conversations and not always having to, be micromanaged and like every moment kind of working, we need to recharge and do that and have some of those things. Think about the challenges that you have put in front of people. What are the goals? Make sure that they're buying into those. And then again, if you can align people to the mission of the organization and make sure that you get the right people in and making sure you're communicating that appropriately. Those are big pieces. So yeah.
So whenever you or your company's brought in to talk to a business, do you, and maybe not specifically, but is the idea that I should think about my business kind of the same way we talked about those individual um, ideas? So like you said, you want to align people in teams with goals, right?
Yep.
So should I do almost that, if then analysis with my business as well? Like we think about, this is, if I do this, then this could happen. Or is it more of a like just a I'm trying to think of even how I'm trying to phrase this question, like a mission statement. Like,
Yeah.
should everything just go towards one kind of North Star? Like, how does someone think about their business in order to set up then the motivations for their team?
Yeah, I'm so again, it is a complex situation, but to that degree that you can kind of look and see what could be the potential downfall. So I'm a big believer. Annie Duke is a decision scientist. She actually was a world poker champion, right? And
Mm,
she won, but she took her kind of insights from playing poker and kind of applied them to decision making. And one of the things that she talks about is doing a pre-mortem. And that's been brought up by other people as well. But this idea of, all right, so I look 2 years down the road on any kind of initiative or project or whatever I'm doing. And now I envision that it failed. All right. Now I work backwards from that. So as opposed to like looking at something after it's happened and kind of trying to figure out what went wrong, you're doing that in advance and you kind of identify what are those potential roadblocks, where are the things that could go wrong, and then you build in those if then statements. So if this does happen, then here's how we respond. And particularly as it gets to like teams and humans and like motivation and engagement, that's a really good kind of process to work through, is to understand, all right, 2 years down the road and this team that I'm working with, they are just disengaged, not happy, all these different things. And you kind of go, what went wrong? Where are those different things? And you can like, that can branch out into 100 different things. And so you got to kind of narrow it down and kind of look at what are most likely scenarios and various different things. But doing that exercise in and of itself can really help you look at how I'm currently set up on my incentives, my culture that I have, my leadership style that I'm doing, what are those things, as opposed to getting a short-term myopic perspective, kind of take that longer perspective and look at where things could go wrong, not just where things are going right. There's a element that's in psychology called mental contrasting. And so it's this idea of kind of looking at that idea of, all right, here's the good, but here's also the bad. So contrasting and then figuring out what goes into that. Michael Phelps has talked about all the time of doing this visioning exercises that he does, about envisioning like this exercise, and he spends an hour. His coach made him do that an hour every day before practice even started. And he got bored of always having like the perfect swimming, that's what they told him to do. Envision the perfect 100-meter butterfly, envision the perfect whatever it would be. And he started just getting bored doing that. So he said, well, what would happen if if I fumble off the starting block? What would happen if I missed a turn? What would happen if my goggles came off? And actually in one of his Olympic races, his goggles did come off, right? They came off when he dove in, but he was able to go, oh, I've envisioned this. I envisioned what goes wrong, and here's what I need to do. And it didn't miss a beat. And he actually won that race. It became whatever. He beat, Spink's, single Olympic gold medal count or whatever on that race. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Are there specific tools? I know we talked about, your guys' journal, but are there behavioral science tools that someone can use to start to, apply these things that you've talked about to their life?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, journals, even if it's not ours, I will, kind of promote, because we built it based on behavioral science principles. And so it looks at helping people understand, all right, let's set keystone goals. And we talk about keystone goals as these goals that are really important. So trying to help you identify the right goals to strive for, as opposed to just kind of the goals, and kind of looking at that and kind of doing through a process to help you do that, but then breaking that down into weekly kind of actions that you do, but then bringing in elements of following and having prompts that will get you to think about this, but also tracking your progress, and making sure that you are doing, giving motivation. Progress principle is one interesting thing, is we're motivated by seeing that we're actually doing something, we're making progress on something, bringing in elements of gratitude and various different pieces. So, kind of, saying, hey, you can use a journal, kind of do that. You can use like a checklist to say, hey, here I'm doing this every day. This idea of consistency and tracking apps and various different pieces. So again, if you're trying to do something, just something that is going to help you get to the point where, again, you're taking some of the effort of willpower away and setting up those systems and processes and reminders that are going to lead you to do the right behaviors at the right time, given all of that. So,
specifically with the journal, is it set up in a way that's like more like a calendar? And I'm talking about your guys' journal, or is it more of a kind of a open-ended, like with those prompts and things like that?
yeah, so it's a book,
Okay.
so it's 13 weeks in length. It's called Brain Shift, the Brain Shift Journal. It's volume 1. We're going to build out multiple volumes of this. The first one is focusing in on habits and goals. Those are the behavioral science principles that we talk about each week. So each week is a new behavioral science insight that you can use in order to help you understand your behaviors better and understand goals and habits, and how do I set those up, and how do I do them, and understand how the science behind that works. And then we try to build in prompts every day, and it starts off every week, has a different behavioral science principle. There are some prompts on every days that are the same, because we know there's great value and consistency. We also know that we're novelty seeking creatures as humans, and so every week we have some different prompts, so it doesn't get boring, that you kind of continue to go, oh, this is different, I didn't think about it this way from last week. And so bringing that in, but then also kind of tying in some of those different aspects. So it's a 13-week journal. Every day has its own page. every week has its kind of insights into, the behavioral science pieces of it. And then we also give you a reprise at the end of the week. It's like just a reflection. You don't have to actually do anything, strenuous, and but it's reflecting. And we know that reflection helps us kind of look back and say what worked, what didn't work, various different pieces. But yeah, so it's 3 to 4 prompts every day. They're different. One is always on gratitude, but it changes up every day of the week. One is on kind of like, what do I need to do today? What am I missing? Where are the areas that I can improve on? Some are taking that behavioral science and how do I apply, tiny habits into, achieving my goals, et cetera. Those types of things that we go and do. So
awesome. So, and we'll put a link to the journal in the show notes and in the description. But what's the best way for someone to reach out to you or getting, if they have questions or someone
yeah.
wants your expertise?
Yeah, so I'm always happy to talk to anybody. You can reach me on LinkedIn. It's Kurt W. Nelson. Or on Twitter, it's at What Motivates, or Behavioral Guru. I have 2 of them, so either one works. But yeah, those are a couple ways. And again, the podcast that I do with my co-host Tim Houlihan is called Behavioral Grooves. And so if you just Google Behavioral Grooves, we're on all the podcast services out there. So, we talk to people much smarter than I am on this. And so if this is of any interest to you, and again, it's not always, focused in on business. It can be a wide variety of things. But again, as you mentioned at the beginning, I think that the human element within organizations is always so important that, you can have the best technology, can have the best of everything else, but there is a human component that if you can maximize and leverage that you're going to be that much better. So
Well, it just seems important, no matter what we're doing, even if, like you said, you're not going into business, but understanding why things are marketed to you, understanding
yeah,
why you have your own these biases about things, or why the news media or social media is doing things the way they're doing. I think it kind of comes back to that whole mindfulness thing. It's an important thing to understand, even if you don't get into the scientific details of it. A broad understanding is helpful.
yeah. I mean, it's strange. I mean, we had a whole, I don't know why, but we ended up talking to a number of people about conspiracy theories and various different things. And like one was like, how do you talk to your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that might not necessarily translate into business, but it's still, you have to be able to understand different perspectives and different people, and whether that's in your personal life or in work or whatever. And so helping understand how to do that is really important. And that's some of the things that we talk about, and hopefully it's fun. So
Is the and I keep going down different rabbit holes. I could do this all day with you, but
it's okay. I love rabbit holes.
Is the conspiracy theory thing kind of relate back to the confirmation bias? Like our brain just wants something to make sense. Why do they work?
Yeah, there's a lot. And so there's lots of different things, but some of the research that they're talking about conspiracy theorists is that, there's usually some trigger point in their life that something has gone wrong,
Okay.
different things. And so it's about control, right? And community. Oftentimes, conspiracy believers feel ostracized or left out or left behind. And so by kind of joining in this group, usually they're pretty tight knit communities that reinforce, and like it gives you this sense of community, B, a sense of kind of authority, or we know something that you don't. Everybody else is wrong and we're right. We know something that we don't. So you're kind of elevating your own self-worth and self-esteem. There is that confirmation bias that comes in and kind of relays all of this, like, all right, so the information that any contradictory information that we get, I mean, conspiracy theories are great because, you go, oh, that just proves that the conspiracy runs, deeper than it is. My favorite was the conspiracy theorist, the flat earther who went up to heaven and met, God at the pearly gates, or, and he said, yeah, so I just want to show, that the world is flat, right? And he's like, no, see, it's round. And he goes, oh, this conspiracy goes higher than I thought, and it's like all of these kind of things, but they're real. And the piece about that is, understanding why somebody believes, and the fact that if you just try to give them proof and different pieces, that 99.9% of the time does not change people's beliefs around that. And the way to do it, and I'll summarize this, is just Kwame Christian, which is a gentleman that we talked with. It wasn't about conspiracy theories, it was about negotiation and kind of getting to know people. But he has this idea called compassionate curiosity. And that is basically a simple way of what most of the researchers are saying. If you want to actually talk to somebody and get them, just ask them questions and be compassionately curious in reality. So why do you think that? What is it about it? What does that mean? Where are you are there other alternatives that you could understand around that? And those are really being honest and and not trying to change their belief, but just really trying to understand them. And when they start thinking about things and it's their own mind that is coming up with these, oh, well, maybe it isn't that, maybe it is something else. That's actually when people start to change. And you're showing that they're part of that they don't feel like they're being threatened, and you could help form that new community, that new relationship, which again, most people are striving for. So
I think that compassionate curiosity we could apply to all aspects of our life, right? I
yeah,
think the more dialogue we can have with other humans in a meaningful way, I think is going to be important.
yeah, it's changed the way that I go about life once Kwame said that. Just again, simple words, but yeah, compassionate curiosity is fantastic.
That's awesome. Kurt, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I knew that it was going to be insightful and exciting, but you blew my expectations out of the water. So I really appreciate it.
Jordan, thank you. I mean, great questions, great conversation. Just thank you, and hopefully it was valuable.
For sure. And I want to check out your podcast because I know that I'm going to end up in more rabbit holes just listening to you guys do this. So thanks again.
Thank you.